All right, ready to dive into some seriously ancient history. Today, we're tackling Noah's Ark.
Oh, yeah, the one with the flood and all the animals, right?
Exactly. But we're going beyond the Sunday school version here.
Sounds intriguing.
Oh, it is. The source material we dug up takes some wild turns, let me tell you.
I'm all ears.
Good, because we're about to get into some eyebrow-raising stuff. Things that'll make you wonder if someone was getting a little too creative with their storytelling.
Well, that's what makes these deep dives so fun, challenging those traditional narratives.
Exactly. So let's start with something that jumped out at me right away, the whole lifespan thing.
Yes. The source makes a big deal about how people before the flood supposedly lived for hundreds of years.
Hundreds. Noah, for example, like, seriously,
Right.
were they counting years differently back then?
Well, the source tries to connect these crazy long lifespans to the Sumerian king list, that ancient record of kings who supposedly ruled for thousands of years.
Okay, but even if we take those records at face value, it's still mind-boggling,
That's
right?
it.
Imagine trying to remember what you did last week, let alone 900 years ago.
Right. But here's where it gets even weirder. The source points out this verse in the Bible that seems to predict a 120-year lifespan.
Which, coincidentally, is pretty close to the modern human lifespan limit.
Exactly. And they even tie it to the Chinese character for generation, which implies a 30-year generational cycle.
It's like they knew something about our modern demographics way back then. But speaking of things that make you scratch your head, let's talk about the source's explanation for these long lifespans, the vapor canopy.
Yes, the idea that the Earth was once enveloped in a layer of water vapor, protecting us from harmful cosmic rays.
It sounds like something out of a sci-fi novel. Earth is one giant sauna.
Well, the source tries to back it up with some evidence. They bring up those massive pterosaurs, those flying reptiles with ridiculous wingspans.
Those things were
Exactly. And the source argues that their size suggests a much denser atmosphere in the past, something a vapor canopy could have created.
So picture this. Earth, back in the day, with pterosaurs the size of small planes flying around. Now that's an image.
The source also points to evidence of a much warmer ancient Earth. Tropical plant fossils found in the Arctic, fossilized trees without the typical growth rings that indicate seasonal changes.
So maybe those ancient folks weren't just exaggerating about the good old days being warmer.
Perhaps not, but there's a big question here.
Yeah, wouldn't all that water vapor just, rain down like all the time?
Good point. And the source does address that. They suggest that this vapor layer existed high up in the atmosphere, where temperatures are high enough to keep water vapor in a gaseous state. They even connect this to the appearance of rainbows.
Rainbows? What do rainbows have to do with it?
Well, according to the source, rainbows wouldn't have been possible with this dense vapor canopy, which explains why the Bible says rainbows only appeared after the flood.
Okay, that's a pretty creative explanation. But let's get back to Noah's Ark itself. The source mentions this interesting link between the Ark and the Chinese character for ship.
Oh yes, the one composed of 8 mouths, representing the 8 people on board the Ark.
It's a pretty wild coincidence. Makes you wonder about the origins of that character and whether it actually predates the introduction of Christianity to China.
It's a fascinating thought. But let's talk practicality for a moment. How big was this ark, really? And how did they manage to fit all those animals in there?
Yeah, the source brings up how the cubit measurement used to describe the ark's dimensions is pretty vague, leading to all sorts of size estimates.
It's true, but you know what's amazing? A Dutchman actually built a life-size replica of the ark, based on those biblical descriptions.
Wait, seriously? Someone built a Noah's Ark in modern times?
Yep. And what he discovered about its capacity was pretty surprising.
So was it big enough? Could it actually hold all those animals?
Well, it's definitely more spacious than you might think, but even with all that room, it still begs the question, how did they cram every single species on Earth into that thing?
Right. It's mind-boggling. Now, our source offers a pretty radical suggestion. Maybe they didn't take the whole animal, just their DNA.
A prehistoric gene bank. That's a wild idea.
It is. And it's not as crazy as it sounds, considering we have something similar today, the Svalbard Global Seed Vault. It's like a modern-day Noah's Ark for plant biodiversity, storing seeds and DNA for preservation.
Interesting parallel. So maybe Noah was just ahead of his time.
Maybe so. But let's be real, if there was this massive ark sailing around during a global flood, shouldn't we have found it by now?
Well, about that, there have been some pretty intriguing discoveries over the years. The source actually mentions something called the Ararat Anomaly.
The Ararat Anomaly, what's that?
It's supposed to be this arc-shaped object spotted on Mount Ararat.
Oh, wow. So they found it.
Yeah. Well, not so fast. Sadly for all those Ark hunters out there, it was later
Oh,
dismissed.
bummer. What happened?
Apparently, the size didn't quite match up with what the Ark should be.
Another arc-shaped disappointment.
Mm-hmm.
But wait, I think this source mentioned another site too, right? Something about the Durupinar site.
You had a good memory. Yes, that's another one near Mount Ararat. And get this, the dimensions of this site are actually closer to what the Ark is supposed to be.
Interesting. So what is it exactly?
It's a boot-shaped formation. At first, scientists thought it was just a natural formation, just a quirk of the landscape.
Right.
But then they brought out the metal detectors.
Oh, and what did they find?
They found metal alloys under the site.
Metal alloys. Like what kind?
We're talking aluminum and titanium.
Aluminum and titanium. Hold on. Those aren't exactly things you just find lying around in nature, are they? Sounds a bit like we're heading into ancient aliens territory here.
Huh. Well, the source has a slightly more grounded explanation.
Not listening.
They suggest that maybe, over time, the wooden parts of the Ark were salvaged for building materials.
Makes sense. Wood would be pretty valuable, especially after a flood.
Right, so what's left behind is just the metal framework.
Interesting theory. But is there anything else to support it?
Actually, there is. They found some other evidence near the site, fossilized seashells.
Seashells. Okay, that makes sense if we're talking about a flood.
Right, and there's more. They also found a piece of petrified deck.
A piece of the Ark's deck.
Wow. And to top it off, they even found stone anchors carved with crosses.
Stone anchors with crosses. Now, that's pretty specific.
It is. So, what do you think? Have we finally found the real deal?
Well, I'm not sure about found, but Turkey seems to believe it. They actually declared the Durupinar site Noah's Ark National Park back in 1987.
That's a pretty bold statement. A whole national park dedicated to a potential biblical relic.
It is. But, it's not just about the Ark itself, is it? It's about the whole reason behind the flood.
You mean wiping out the wickedness of humanity?
Exactly. What does our source say about that? What was so wicked about these people?
Well, here's where things get really interesting. The source suggests that it wasn't just humans who were being wicked.
Oh, someone else was involved.
They propose that it also had something to do with the Nephilim.
The Nephilim. Remind me who they are again?
They're the offspring of, wait for it, fallen angels and human women.
Fallen angels and human women. Okay, now we're getting into some serious ancient mythology here. So, are we saying God was dealing with a bunch of rebellious demigods?
Something like that. The source describes these Nephilim as powerful, violent giants who were terrorizing both humans and animals.
Giant troublemakers. Got it.
And the source even tries to connect this to those ancient mythologies with hybrid creatures, like the Egyptian gods with animal heads.
So, like some kind of ancient genetic experiment gone wrong.
Exactly. Maybe God's own creations were the real problem, and the flood was just a way to hit the cosmic reset button.
Whoa. That's a heavy thought.
Yeah.
But if God was trying to start fresh, why leave any survivors at all? Wouldn't Noah and his family just bring the same problems back?
It's a good question. Why were they chosen? Was it to preserve something of humanity? Or maybe, and here's where the source gets a bit playful.
Playful. How so?
They suggest that maybe Noah just knew how to keep a secret, while his wife, well, let's just say she might have been a bit more talkative.
Always the wife spilling the beans, right?
Yeah.
But seriously, this idea of the flood as a cleanup of a divine experiment, that's pretty wild.
It is. It makes you wonder about the lasting impact of this story, assuming it's more than just a myth.
Right. What does it mean for us today?
And that's where things get even more interesting. Our source makes this chilling observation. They say the story of Noah's Ark feels less like a tale of the past and more like a warning for the future.
A warning for the future. You mean like we're on track to repeat history?
Maybe so. They connect the themes of the story to the anxieties we're dealing with today: environmental destruction, unchecked power.
Yeah, I can see the climate change, political turmoil, technological advancements that seem to be spiraling out of control. Are we the Nephilim of our time, messing with forces we don't fully understand?
It's a thought-provoking parallel. And get this, the source even goes so far as to suggest that maybe the reason we haven't found definitive proof of the Ark and the flood is because it hasn't happened yet.
Hold on, are you saying Noah's Ark is a prophecy? A glimpse into a potential future?
It's a mind-blowing idea, isn't it? Maybe we're not looking for evidence of the past, but a warning sign for what's to come.
All right, so we've covered a lot of ground here. Ancient lifespans, that whole vapor canopy thing, giant offspring causing chaos. We even touched on the search for the Ark itself.
It's been quite a journey.
Yeah, it has. But now I'm wondering, what does this ancient tale have to do with us today? How do we connect all this to the challenges we're facing in the 21st century?
It's a good question. It's easy to get lost in the more fantastical elements of the story.
Right, like the whole flood wiping out everything.
Exactly. But even if we set aside the literal interpretations, there are some pretty profound takeaways.
For sure. I mean, our source talks about the flood as a kind of reset button for humanity.
A fresh start.
Right. And that got me thinking, what are the reset buttons we have today? Obviously, we're not going to have another global flood.
Hopefully not.
But are there moments or opportunities where we can choose to change direction, to do things differently?
Absolutely. Think about those times in our lives, whether it's personal or on a larger scale, where we're faced with a crisis or a major upheaval. It can be tough, even devastating, but it also forces us to reevaluate things.
To really look at what's not working.
Exactly. It's like we're being forced to confront the wickedness, the flaws, and make a conscious choice about the future.
So it's not about waiting for some external force to fix things for us.
No, it's about taking responsibility for our actions, both individually and collectively, and making those deliberate choices that lead to positive change.
And, just like Noah and his family had to band together to build the ark and survive the storm, we need to collaborate, find common ground.
It's not about individual survival, but about coming together to find solutions that benefit everyone.
So we're not just each building our own little metaphorical ark to protect ourselves.
No, it's about working together to create a more sustainable, just, and equitable world.
Where everyone has a chance to thrive.
Exactly.
It's a huge task, no doubt, but the story of Noah's Ark gives us a framework for thinking about these big challenges.
And the kind of effort it takes to overcome them.
And speaking of challenges, our source also talks about the dangers of unchecked power, whether it's divine power or human power.
The story of the Nephilim is a good example of that, those powerful beings who, according to the source, caused so much chaos.
It's a reminder that power in the wrong hands can be incredibly destructive.
And that's something we need to be aware of today, whether it's political power, corporate power, or even the power of technology.
It all comes down to ethics, responsibility, using whatever power we have wisely.
We can't just blindly chase progress without considering the consequences.
We have to think about the impact on those around us, on future generations.
Be the Noahs of our time, making thoughtful choices.
And part of that responsibility is recognizing the importance of preserving knowledge, diversity, the interconnectedness of all living things.
The Ark was like a repository of the world's biodiversity.
A way to ensure that life continued, even after a catastrophe.
And that resonates with the efforts we see today to protect endangered species, preserve cultures and languages, safeguard our ecosystems.
We have to be stewards of this planet, caretakers of its diversity and its web of life.
It's not just about preserving things for ourselves, but for future generations.
Creating those arcs, both literal and metaphorical, to safeguard what we value most.
Absolutely.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Noah's Ark, we're left with more than just an ancient myth.
It's a call to action.
A challenge to be mindful of our own power, to act with wisdom and compassion.
To build a future where everyone can thrive.
It's a lot to think about.
It is. But these deep dives are all about challenging assumptions, exploring different perspectives.
And sometimes feeling a bit uncomfortable along the way.
For sure. But often, the most fantastical stories hold the most profound truths.
And the story of Noah's Ark, despite being ancient, has a message that still resonates today.
It reminds us of our responsibility to each other and to this planet.
So, as we leave you to ponder this story and its implications, we want to leave you with a question. What kind of ark will you build? What choices will you make to ensure a brighter future?
For yourself, for your community, for the planet we all call home.
It's something to think about. Keep exploring, keep questioning, keep learning.
And keep building those arcs, big and small. The world needs them.